Hello and welcome to a reading and analysis of William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Today we dive into Act 4, Scene 7, the last scene of the act. So getting near the end here. All right, where we last left off, Hamlet was on his way back to court via pirate intervention. Let's see what's happening here. Start off with the King and Laertes talking. Now must your conscience my acquaintance seal, and you must put me in your heart for friend, since you have heard, and with a knowing ear, that he which hath your noble father slain pursued my life. So we're in the middle of this conversation between them, and it seems like the king has been telling Laertes that Hamlet is actually the cause of all of this, not him, which is, the king trying to preserve his own life, prevent uprising, prevent Laertes' rage and the people that support Laertes. Laertes says, "It well appears, but tell me why you proceeded not against these feats, so criminal and so capital in nature, as by your safety, greatness, wisdom, all things else you mainly were stirred up. Oh, for two special reasons, which may to you perhaps seem much unsinewed, but yet to me they're strong." So sinew, like the part of your muscles, right? So he says, you might not think these are strong reasons why Hamlet wasn't put to death, why he wasn't punished more for this, but let me explain, and you'll see my rationale. So what he's about to share is information we've already heard before, but repeating it is useful, I guess. The queen, his mother, lives almost by his looks. And for myself, my virtue or my plague, be it either which, she is so conjunctive to my life and soul that, as the star moves not but in his sphere, I could not but by her. So he's saying he cares a lot about Gertrude and is very connected to Gertrude, right? She is also like the reason that he's on the throne, and because Gertrude doesn't want Hamlet punished, Hamlet has not been severely punished. The other motive why to a public count I might not go is the great love, the general gender here means, it's kind of funny. General gender is just imagining a very interesting military leader. General gender means general person. Gender means person here. Is the great love the general gender bear him, who, dipping all his faults in their affection, would, like the spring that turneth wood to stone, convert his gifts to graces, so that my arrows, too slightly timbered for so loud a wind, would have reverted to my bow again, but not where I have aimed them. So we get two images there that Shakespeare's using, or Claudius is using through Shakespeare. The first is that the general public opinion is like water that turns wood into stone, so petrifies stone, and that they're also able to transform shackles, gives to graces. And basic, I guess a third image is the wind, that if you were to shoot an arrow at Hamlet, the wind, the public opinion would actually spin the arrow back and send it toward him. So again, this is information we've already heard before from Claudius. The reason he couldn't punish Hamlet for any of this, his suspicious behavior, the murder of Polonius especially, is because of Hamlet's mom, Gertrude, and the general people like Hamlet a lot. And so have I a noble father lost, a sister driven into desperate terms, whose worth, if praises may go back again, stood challenger on mount of all the age for her perfections. But my revenge will come. So Laertes says, okay, whatever to that, I've lost my father, and who is noble, and a sister who, while Ophelia is alive, she has changed, right? She's lost her mind. And where she was originally, she was like one of the worthiest, greatest people in existence. And now look what's become of her. Break not your sleeps for that. You must not think that we are made of stuff so flat and dull that we can let our beard be shook with danger and think it pastime. You shortly shall hear more. I loved your father, and we love ourself, and that, I hope, will teach you to imagine. But then a messenger interrupts. So the king is like, just be patient. Soon you're going to hear word about just how seriously we take this sort of stuff, which is the king predicting word of Hamlet's execution in England. But he can't come right out and say that. So this is some of that like backroom political dealing here, where the king is trying to win Laertes over without officially stating that he's ordered Hamlet's execution. He's going to be surprised, though. Enter a messenger with letters. How now, what news? Letters, my lord, from Hamlet. There to your majesty, this to the queen. From Hamlet, who brought them? Sailors, my lord, they say. I saw them not. They were given to me by Claudio. He received them of him that brought them. I don't think Claudio has been mentioned before in this play. I don't believe he's mentioned after either. So I guess it's just a random sailor that we get a name for here. Maybe a bit of a continuity error on Shakespeare's part. Maybe Claudio was supposed to be more of a character mentioned earlier. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. I was thinking about this earlier today, and I could not find any mention of Claudio. Obviously, Claudius is receiving the letters, so maybe there's like a joke on his name being made. Claudio is also a character that shows up in other Shakespeare plays, like Much Ado. But yeah, I don't know why he's mentioned here by name. So yeah. He received them of him that brought them. Of him that brought them, yeah. Laertes, you shall hear them. Leave us. So the messenger exits. Now the king is reading. Claudius is reading the letter. High and mighty, you shall know I am set naked on your kingdom. Tomorrow shall I beg leave to see your kingly eyes, when I shall, first asking your pardon, thereunto recount the occasion of my sudden and more strange return. Hamlet. So this is a letter from Hamlet to the king. And basically he's saying, I'm coming back to the kingdom naked, and I want to ask forgiveness. Naked here means defenseless, but is also a funny word. And that joke is being played up, right? Do you know you the hand? Asks Laertes. 'Tis Hamlet's character, meaning Hamlet's handwriting. Naked. And in a postscript here, he says, alone. And you advise me? So he looks to Laertes for advice. Why would Hamlet, first off, be able to come back? Right, that's got to be going through Claudius's mind. He was sent to England to be put to death, and now he's on his way back. And he is coming back to ask forgiveness. He's coming back defenseless and alone. So this is very strange. This is not according to the plan for the king, but it's also not the worst news in the world. It's not like Hamlet's coming back with an army, or Hamlet is sneaking back, right? Like he's announcing himself. Laertes says, I am lost in it, my lord, but let him come. It warms the very sickness in my heart that I shall live and tell him to his teeth, thus didst thou. So Laertes wants his revenge from Hamlet. He wants to tell Hamlet to his face what he's done. If it be so, Laertes, as how should it be so, how otherwise, will you be ruled by me? I, my lord, so you will not o'errule me in... Oh, gosh. I, my lord, so you will not o'errule me to a peace. So he's like, I'll listen to you as long as you don't try and get me to be peaceful with him. To thine own peace, meaning like you will be at peace after you do what I suggest. If he be now returned, as checking at his voyage, and that he means no more to undertake it, I will work him to an exploit, now ripe in my device, under the which he shall not choose but fall. And for his death no wind of blame shall breathe, but even his mother shall uncharge the practice and call it accident. So the king has come up. He says that it's not ripe yet. He's still thinking it through, but he's coming up with a plan to get Hamlet, to cause Hamlet's death. And it'll look like an accident. And that solves the problem of his mom and the problem of the general public. And Laertes says, my lord, I will be ruled the rather if you could devise it so that I might be the organ. Organ there means instrument. So Laertes wants to be the way Hamlet. He wants to be the one facilitating and causing Hamlet's death. It falls right. You have been talked of since your travel much, and that in Hamlet's hearing for a quality wherein they say you shine. Your sum of parts did not together pluck such envy from him as did that one, and that, in my regard, of the unworthiest siege. What part is it, my lord? So the king is talking about, and we can really, I think, take this with a grain of salt, like how much either he's really good at coming up with stuff off the top of his head and lying, which we know Claudius is good at lying, right? He wouldn't be in this position on the throne if he was a bad liar or an honest person. So maybe he's just making all this up. Maybe there's some truth to it. But apparently Hamlet has always been envious of one thing about Laertes. And Hamlet's a prince. Like, what does he have to be envious about? Like, not typical things people are envious about, like money or possessions or something. No, it's a quality of Laertes. But the king doesn't tell him right away. He's really trying to invite Laertes and entice him into this conversation. What part is that, my lord? A very ribbon in the cap of youth, yet needful too, for youth no less becomes the light and careless livery that it wears than settled age, his sables and his weeds importuning health and graveness. So this is a very complicated metaphor about like wearing a ribbon, and like livery is like your clothes, and like enviness. So I'm just going to read the Folger edition, which I have linked it down below. It really helps you out. It says, clothes worn by youth are as becoming to the young as the garments of age are to their comfortably prosperous wearers. Okay. Don't know how much that helped. It helps a little bit. But basically, how I take it is he's latching on to envy and how when people wear different things, how it appears to different groups of people. Let's get on to the details of the plot. 2 months since here was a gentleman of Normandy. Normandy's a part of France, right? Where Laertes went to school in France. I have seen myself and served against the French, and they can well on horseback, but this gallant had witchcraft in it. He grew unto his seat, and to such wondrous doing brought his horse as he had been encorpsed and demi-natured with the brave beast. So far he topped my thought that I, in forgery of shapes and tricks, come short of what he did. So basically this guy who is really good at horseback riding, so good at horseback riding, he seemed to transform into half a horse, like a centaur is what they're getting at here. It's an interesting way to compliment someone. A Norman, was it? A Norman. Upon my life, Lamord. The very same. So Laertes is filling in the blanks. Claudius is like, there's this French guy from Normandy who's so good at horseback riding. It was crazy how good he was. And Laertes is like, Lamord? And he's like, yeah, that was his name, Lamord. So again, Claudius is probably just making all this up. But Laertes is like filling in the backstory, which is making it very convincing to him, to Laertes. The very same. I know him well. He was the brooch. He was the brooch indeed and gem of all the nation. So one of the best people in the whole country. He made confession of you and gave you such a masterly report for art and exercise in your defense, and for your rapier most especial, that he cried out, 'twould be a sight indeed if one could match you. The skirmers of their nation, he swore, had neither motion, guard, nor eye, if you opposed them. Sir, this report of his did Hamlet so envenom with his envy that he could nothing do but wish and beg your sudden coming o'er to play with you. Now out of this, so here we see the mastery. He says that this Norman guy, who we've already like really talked up as being really great at manly things like horseback riding and being French, that this Norman, Lamord, complimented Laertes' skill at a rapier, fencing, basically, and said that no one could match Laertes, that he was the best. So I don't know. I guess this would be like hearing from the president that like Tom Brady was really impressed with your high jumping skills, right? Like Tom Brady is known for football. This Norman guy is known for horseback riding. But he's really impressed by Laertes' fencing. Really, Tom Brady's really impressed by how good you are at high jump, right? So I feel like someone of that caliber of accomplishment in a field like athletic athletic fields, complimenting your athleticism in any way, shape, or form would be seen as a great compliment. So anyway, the king is trying to move on to this. He's like, okay, and well, yeah. Anyway, that was interesting. But Laertes is like drawing him into more conversation. And of course, part of the story that the king is spinning is that Hamlet was very envious of this compliment that Laertes got from this Lamord the Norman about his fencing. And all he wanted to do was come over and play with him, meaning fence with him. What out of this, my lord? Laertes, was your father dear to you? Or are you like the painting of a sorrow, a face without a heart? So I think that makes sense what he's saying. Like, do you actually care about your father? Or are you pretending to care about your father? Very interesting when you think of the parallels between Laertes and Hamlet, and especially the beginning of the play, what Hamlet said. He didn't use painting, but he used an actor to describe the pretend sorrow that people can put on. Why ask you this? Not that I think you did not love your father, but that I know love is begun by time, and that I see, in passage of proof, time qualifies the spark and fire of it. There lives within the very flame of love a kind of wick or snuff that will abate it, and nothing is at a like goodness still, for goodness growing to pleasury dies in his own too much. That we should do when we would, for this would changes, and hath abatements and delays as many as our tongues, our hands, our accidents. And then this should is like a spendthrift sigh that hurts by easing. But to the quick of the ulcer, Hamlet comes back. What would you undertake to show yourself indeed your father's son, more than in words, to cut his throat in the church? Whew. So the king has this big, long, linguistically gymnastics, verbal gymnastics. That's what I was trying to say. This verbal gymnastics of like when you love someone, like that sorrow changes over time, and the would becomes a could or becomes a should, and like all this sort of stuff of like really baiting Laertes. Do you actually love your father? Right? This is so different than when Claudius is talking to Hamlet about saying it is unmanly grief to grieve too long for the death of your father, that your father lost a father, that father lost his, and so on, right? Like he's basically saying to Hamlet, like you need to get over it. You can't persever in obstinate sorrow or something like that. Here, though, he is saying, do you actually love your father? Are you just saying it? So here he's really pushing the reaction to his father's murder. And Laertes, doesn't even get a full verse line to answer. He doesn't need a full verse line. He just finishes that more than in words to cut his throat in the church. Like, I would kill Hamlet in the church. No place indeed should murder sanctuarize. You shouldn't kill people in the church, right? No murder in the church. That's not the right spot to murder. Revenge should have no bounds. But, good Laertes, will you do this? Keep close within your chamber. Hamlet returned shall know you are come home. Will put on those shall praise your excellence and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you, bring you and find together, and wager on your heads, he being remiss, most generous, and free from all contriving, will not peruse the foils, so that with ease or with a little shuffling you may choose a sword unbaited. Unbaited means unblunted. You will choose a sharp sword, and in a passive practice requite him for your father. So what the king is proposing, what Claudius is proposing, is bolstering up this story about Laertes's compliments that he's gotten for his fencing, and setting people around Hamlet to talk it up and get Hamlet more and more interested in fighting him, and then setting up a competition where there's like gambling involved and prizes involved for Laertes and Hamlet to fence against each other. But because Hamlet will be so worked up about this and so excited about it, he won't look over the foils, the swords, too carefully. So one of them will be sharpened, not blunted. I'm sure you know this, but in fencing, as a sport, the sword is not sharp. Or in stage combat, the sword is not sharp, right? The sides of it are not sharp, they are blunted, and the tip of the sword is rounded over so that while they are still dangerous, you still wear protection and practice safe, stage combat or fencing practices, because you could poke someone in the eye or the throat or something. They are not as dangerous as a sword because they are not sharp. So, but never do stage combat without like proper training and stuff, because swords break and then they become very, very sharp. So anyway, disclaimer. But in this situation, one of the foils will be left sharp. And the thing about swords is, unless you look at them carefully, it's hard to tell if they're sharp or not. Unless you actually inspect them from a distance or when they're moving quickly, they look sharp. They wouldn't work on stage as weapon-looking things if they didn't look like weapons, and they really do. So here we have a setup. Laertes will pick the sharp sword when he connects with Hamlet. When he gets a hit, it will kill him. It'll stab him for real. And it'll look like an accident because Laertes can claim that he didn't know that the sword was sharp. It was just a mix-up, and therefore he'll be able to get his revenge. But look at what Laertes says here. This is really interesting. I will do it, and for that purpose I'll anoint my sword. I bought an unction of mountebank, so mortal that, but dip a knife in it, where it draws blood, no cataplasm so rare, collected from all simples that have virtue under the moon, can save the thing from death that is but scratched withal. I'll touch my point with this contagion that, if I gall him slightly, it may be death. So Laertes ups the stakes. Not only is it going to be a sharpened sword, but Laertes just bought some poison. Some really powerful poison. So much so that if anyone is even scratched by a blade that is dipped in it, it will kill them. There is no cure available. So now he doesn't even need to stab Hamlet fatally in order to win the fight. He just needs to scratch him. So basically, if this sword touches Hamlet at all with any form of force whatsoever, then Hamlet will die. He'll be poisoned. Now, it's very interesting that Laertes has this poison because he obviously didn't buy it for this plan. This plan was just thought of by Claudius a few lines ago, the previous line. So Laertes has this poison that he bought. I would suggest, and I think others would too, that this poison was meant for Claudius, that he originally came back here to avenge his father's death, but now his target has changed. Claudius has successfully pivoted Laertes's rage and desire for revenge away from himself and toward Hamlet. So, yeah. King says, let's further think of this. Weigh what convenience both of time and means may fit us to our shape. If this should fail, and that our drift look through our bad performance, 'twere better not essayed. Therefore, this project should have a back or second that might hold if this did blast in proof. Soft, let me see. We'll make a solemn wager on your cunnings. Ha! I had it. When in your motion you are hot and dry, as make your bouts more violent to that end, and that he calls for drink, I'll have prepared him a chalice for the nonce, whereon but sipping, if he by chance escape your venomed stuck, our purpose may hold there, but stay, what noise? So the king has raised another fail-safe in order to make sure that this works, because he says it would be very, very bad if this doesn't work and they're discovered and he goes by free. Because in theory, Hamlet could escape this without dying. It is a fencing competition. It is not just hit each other with a sword until everyone's been hit with the sword. There would be a series of rounds that you play, potentially best 2 out of 3, for instance. And if Hamlet wins those first 2 rounds, or wins enough rounds that he wins the whole competition, there would be no reason for him to be struck with this sword. So if Laertes were to strike him with the sword outside of the competition, then the fact that the sword is poisoned and sharpened is going to look incredibly suspicious. So the king's backup plan is to have a poison chalice, so that when they are fencing and they get very worked up and sweaty and hot from this sporting competition, that when Hamlet calls for a drink or is offered a drink and he drinks the poison chalice, it will kill him. So basically, yeah, there's like 3 traps set to get Hamlet. And they would keep talking about it and probably come up with even more traps. Like you can see in the language there, the king is like thinking of it on the spot, right? Like I feel like we're like 3 or 4 things away from an entire like board game of Mousetrap being brought down on Hamlet, which is interesting because Mousetrap is the name of the play within a play. But anyway, they're interrupted because the queen enters and she's got some big news and some very highly debated lines. Some of the most debated lines in all of Shakespeare coming up right here. The queen says, "One woe doth tend upon another's heels." So like a sorrow is at the heels of another. It just gets worse and worse. "So fast they follow. Your sister's drowned, Laertes." "Drowned? Oh, where?" Famous monologue here. "There is a willow grows aslant the brook, that shows his hoar leaves in the glassy stream." So hoar there means gray. "Wherewith fantastic garlands she did make of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples, that liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do dead men's fingers call them. There, on the pendant boughs, her cornet weeds clambering to hang, an envious sliver broke, when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide, and mermaid-like awhile they bore her up, which time she chanted snatches of old lauds, as one incapable of her own distress, or like a creature native and endued unto that element. But long it could not be, till that her garments, heavy with their drink, pulled the poor wretch from their melodious lay to muddy death. Alas, then she is drowned, drowned, drowned. Too much of water hast thou, poor Ophelia, and therefore I forbid my tears. But yet it is our trick, nature her custom holds, let shame say what it will. When these are gone, the woman will be out. Adieu, my lord. I have a speech of fire that fain would blaze, but that this folly drowns it. And he exits. So Laertes is not allowing himself to cry for Ophelia because she is drowned and she's already had too much water. He also feels like he has things to do and he can't properly mourn right now. But there will be a time when he can mourn his sister's death. He's got other things to plan. Let's follow Gertrude. How much I had to do to calm his rage. Now fear I this will give it start again. Therefore, let's follow. Okay, let's return back to there's a willow grows aslant a brook. This is a crazy interesting monologue. So Gertrude announces Ophelia's death. And the interesting thing about this is it's not just that she's drowned, it's that she's drowned in this incredibly specific way. Like the language here is so like laser focused. There's a very famous painting by John Everett Millais, who is one of the pre-Raphaelite painters of the like Victorian era, of Ophelia drowning in this brook. It's a very, very famous painting. Maybe I'll link it in the description below. But you could just Google it, like Ophelia drowning. You'll find the painting, or Millais Ophelia. Millais Ophelia? Yeah. But yeah, it's this very, very specific painting. And all the images that are in this painting are pulled from this monologue, from this this line here. So the willow that grows aslant a brook, meaning we have a willow tree, but it's not growing straight up and down, it's growing sideways. Like it's perhaps fallen over and is still growing a little bit along the brook as opposed to straight up and down. At least in the Malay painting, that's what we see. There's upturned roots reaching upward. After that, we get the fact that this is a brook. Ophelia doesn't drown in a river. She doesn't drown in a lake or the ocean. She drowns in a brook, which is possible. We know that people can drown in very shallow amounts of water, but a brook seems a less dangerous a body of water than a river, a lake, an ocean might be. That it would be quite a shallow bit of water. And it makes sense that she did drown because of Gertrude's description. So before we get that there, Ophelia is singing songs, and she's gathering all these flowers, and all these flowers have botanical symbolism to them, right? The nettles, the daisies, a lot of this was mentioned earlier when she was handing out flowers a few scenes ago. But the one that's really interesting to me is the long purples, which are orchids. And the long purples that says liberal, so meaning common, plain spoken, shepherds give a grosser name. That grosser name is actually like dog's testicles, is like, I don't know if that's exactly what they called them, but that's what they meant by when they called them. So that these flowers resembled a dog's testicles. But are cold maids, so chaste, meaning cold there means chaste, maids do dead men's fingers call them. So it's interesting that this flower that Shakespeare's using has two forms of symbolism. One relating to sex, and sex of a grosser nature, simply because it's a dog's testicles, right? Like it's a dirty name for the flower, right? And the other one is death. And of course, those are the two things that have driven Ophelia mad. Hamlet's behavior with her, that they had a relationship that seems to have progressed quite far, and then he broke up with her in the cruelest way possible and then stabbed her father, and then her father's death. So we have sex and death kind of wrapped up in that single flower that is mentioned there. So anyway, if we go on past the flowers there, we get this pendant tree branch clamoring to hang an envious sliver broke. So it's almost like it's a malicious branch, like it's envious of Ophelia. And it breaks, and she loses her footing and falls into the brook. However, she just falls into like shallow water. Like she could stand up. It doesn't say she's knocked out by it. It doesn't say she's swept away or is fighting against it. Quite the opposite, actually. It says her weedy trophies, meaning like her flowers that she's holding, and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread and mermaid like a while they bore her up. So her clothes float for a little while, and it keeps her floated to the surface. And she sings mermaid-like songs. Well, mermaid-like, she's floating up, but she's also, mermaids are known to sing. She's singing songs while all of this is happening. Snatches of old lauds, as one incapable of her own distress, or like a creature native and endued unto that element. So literally adapted, or naturally adapted, means that endued unto that element. So either Ophelia is lost her mind so much she can't realize she is drowning, but she also seems to be one with the water. Like she's so in her element as she floats and slowly sinks into this brook. What's really interesting in terms of Hamlet, the play, being so incredibly good at taking something here and weaving it around and having it show back up again here. We see this with Laertes and Hamlet mirroring each other, and the friends of Horatio and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern being foils, and all this sort of stuff. Like there's so much like things that match up later on. And this is probably my favorite one in the whole play, is that the very first words Hamlet ever gives to Ophelia on stage, he writes a letter that we get earlier, but the very first time Hamlet says anything to Ophelia when they are on stage together is at the end of To Be or Not to Be, where he says to the audience, "But soft you now, the fair Ophelia." And then, so that's to the audience. And then to Ophelia, he says, "Nymph, in thy prayers be all my sins remembered." And nymph is, of course, a creature that in mythology, usually a younger woman, but is often associated with the water. So we get this like preview of where Ophelia is going to end up from the very first time Hamlet says something to her. And that's the sort of stuff that you just kind of pick up on repeated readings, and why people keep returning to this play is there's so much that you discover and see deeper into it the more you read it. So anyway, Ophelia is floating there, but eventually long it could not be till that her garments heavy with their drink pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay to muddy death. So she falls deeper into the water as her clothes get soaked, and she dies. So this raises some huge questions. First off, did Ophelia choose to take her own life? Because it seems like she could have just stood up, or she could have swam out of this, that she was not fighting at all to live. So is this madness, as Gertrude seems to suggest it is, or is this resignation on Ophelia's part? Maybe tied into the madness, but we know she's losing her mind. We know she is spiraling in depression and sorrow because of what's happened to Hamlet, and especially what's happened to her father. Could this be that Gertrude is covering up that Ophelia took her own life? Now, why would Gertrude do that? Well, because if you were, back then, if you were, we talked a little bit about this with To Be or Not to Be, if you were convicted after death of having taken your own life, then you were denied a Christian burial. And they believed denial of a Christian burial also meant not getting into heaven. Like it was this unforgivable thing, and you were punished in the afterlife. Your body would have been left out on the road to be eaten by dogs and birds, and everyone in your family would have to see that happening as a deterrent from others potentially taking that same action. So is this an act of mercy on Gertrude's part? Could be. Maybe she's making it all up, and she's trying to put the best possible spin on it so that Ophelia gets the best possible treatment after death, that she's buried in the churchyard. Or did Gertrude kill her? Because if Gertrude has all this description, it seems like she was there. She doesn't say, I heard from someone. She gives a very detailed account of what happened, which makes it seem like she was privy to it in the moment. And if so, why did she not pull her out of the brook? Did she let her madness or whatever inclination it was lead to Ophelia's death? Or did she perhaps cause it? Is she making all this up, or did she push her in the brook? There's some rationale that Gertrude is, for at least a little while in the play, very upset with Ophelia, that she holds Ophelia responsible for Hamlet's madness, which led to him killing Polonius, which led to him being sent away. So is this a great act of mercy on Gertrude's part? Is it Gertrude covering up a terrible murder of her own, as we've seen some people in this family do some murder? Or do we just take it at face value and it is what it is, which is what the text tells us it is? I don't know. That's the highly debated part of this, and that's what, it's a play. So you get to have some influence when you perform it. The person playing Gertrude and the director have a say in what direction you go with this. And different actors and actresses and directors can put a different spin on it, which is really cool. And Shakespeare is great about leaving some things a little ambiguous, and having the audience having the confidence that his audience can debate it instead of needing everything to be spoon-fed to them. So, I mean, that's part of what makes Shakespeare Shakespeare. So anyway, that is the end of Act 4. So a couple of big announcements here before we get into Act 5. On Patreon, the next poll for the next live stream is up. And because right now I've done a few Shakespeare plays in a row, and I'm also directing a Midsummer Night's Dream currently, and it's about to get into a very busy season with that, taking a break from Shakespeare. So there's 4 plays up, none of them are Shakespeare. So we'll be doing something totally different. I put 2 ancient Greek tragedies. We've got Oedipus and Antigone, and 2 more recent plays. some realism for us. We've got Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw or The Seagull by Anton Chekhov. So those are the 4 options. I'd love to work through all of those plays eventually. But if you go onto Patreon, you can vote and pick which one we're going to do. So that'll be up for at least a week, if not maybe 2. So this will be something that starts more toward the end of September and runs through October. So you don't have to be a paying member of Patreon to vote. You just have to become at least a free member, and then you can vote. But I would always appreciate the support if you're in a position to do that, and you want to do that. Helps out the channel a lot. What also helps out the channel is this wonderful brand, Field Notes, that I'm always talking about. So this is the National Parks Field Notes, one of the many different editions. If you're interested in these, there is a link and discount code in the description. 10% of your order comes back to the channel, and it gets you 10% off your first order as well. And the national park ones, 5% of that goes to supporting the national parks. So that's a lot of percentages that I've thrown at you. But here's a big percentage. We're like 92% done with the play. So just Act 5 remaining, just 2 scenes to go. They're long ones, but they're crazy fun and really interesting. So I'll see you for Act 5 in the near future. Until then, any questions, leave them down in the comments, and happy reading. Thank you so much for watching.